Hello and welcome to Defence Line, a weekly program on defence, security and more. I am Kamar Sandhu. In this episode of Defence Line, we will discuss the continuing border dispute between India and China and how the latter is strengthening its build-up along the 4,057 kilometre line of actual control. Besides, China is also continuing its policy of encirclement by reaching out not only to India's neighbours but also extending its reach in the Indian Ocean region. The moot point here is, what exactly should be India's response? We will discuss this with Lieutenant General SBS Kochhar, former Commandant of the National Defence Academy, Professor Rakesh Datta, Chairperson, Department of Defence and Security Studies, Punjab University, Chandigarh, and Major General D.P. Singh, former Commandant IMTRAT in Bhutan. Welcome to the studio. But before we jump into the discussion, let's take a look at the uneasy relationship between India and China.
So is China encircling India? For the ones who think it isn't, here's why they should give it a second thought. China's chosen method of checking India's potential to rival it is encirclement of India with a ring of friendly countries providing China with facilities for potential military use. Three countries feature prominently in China's ring of pearls, as it is sometimes referred to. China has maintained close relations with Pakistan for decades, but since 2002, it has begun the construction of a commercial port and a naval base at Gwadar, which promises to give the Chinese Navy significantly improved access to the Indian Ocean. The commercial port at Gwadar was officially commissioned this March and the naval base is expected to be operational soon. The second component of China's encirclement of India involves the construction of port facilities at Sittwe in Myanmar. Also, China has some operations going on in the Coco Islands in Myanmar. To complete the ring, China needs a southern pearl. Hambantota in Sri Lanka is expected to serve that function. Plans for a Chinese construction of a major port at Hambantota are still at an early stage, as Chinese and Sri Lankan governments agreed on its construction only in 2005. Meanwhile, on its northern and northeast frontiers, China has been carrying out developmental activities for a long time now. It has planned a rail link to Gwadar via Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and has already constructed a railway line to Lhasa in Tibet. Also, it has laid down a network of highways across the McMahon line. With a hostile Pakistan to its west, India has a lot more to do if it wants to counter the Chinese dragon.
We will be in conversation with General Kochhar, Professor Datta and General D.P. Singh. General Kochhar, I'll start with you. You have commanded a brigade on the Chinese border. Later you were the commandant in IMTRAT in Bhutan. Your dissertation a couple of years ago was concerning the northeast and China. What was the basic surmise of your dissertation?
Of course, my dissertation was primarily on northeast, but there was a reference to China as well. The highlights were that conflicts are decided on three factors. First is terrain, which is already given. Second point which I highlighted was armament and technology. We must know the enemy's weaponry, yes, systems, and this has been highlighted times without number. And last was the attitude and approach. This is where I thought there is much to be done. That no longer the strategy of a nation is limited to the geographical limits of a particular nation.
But General Kochhar, how much of that surmise is still relevant today, or how have things changed as far as China and India relations are concerned?
Well, the first and the foremost part is that no longer is the Himalayas are unpierceable. Now they can be pierced, which they have proved. If you remember, we went to Bangladesh war in a time and place when the passes were closed. Now that is of no relevance hereafter, because the way they have built up their communications and now they are building up their road network, advanced dumping for very many months can be carried out over there. So this point is totally irrelevant today.
Okay.
And the second point is the capability to deliver ammunition across the international border while you are still in your own territory. This is a very big development which is taking
You're referring to the missile
yes.
Capability of various
yes,
countries.
definitely.
Okay.
And
Professor Datta, now you also dealt with China in your papers. How do you view the threat? I mean, does it loom larger than ever before?
You know, I did it on China factor in India's security, and China, we would say, had always been a factor in India's security. Before 62, it was 1-to-1. Now the threat is intriguing through other countries also. You know, going up to the space also, with anti-satellites also, ocean also, you know, incursion from other countries also, again with the Chinese assistance. So it has broadly, you know, gone in for China trying to nibble India from all the fronts.
So that's a major change that has taken place.
It has taken a very broader view how to, you know, strangulate India. Okay. That is what China.
General DP Singh, now you.
Before I come to this,
yes,
I would slightly disagree with General Kocher as for the terrain, Himalayan terrain as a barrier is concerned. I feel it's still relevant. Reasons for that are the monsoons and the winter season. You may be able to overcome these difficulties of the weather and terrain to an extent, but any large scale operations, this weather factor is definitely going to impact it.
But when we are talking about the threat from China, now you've been the commandant in MTRAT in Bhutan, then you commanded a division in that front, you were the chief of staff of our corps headquarters. So do you think we need to worry as far as China is concerned?
In the recent past, if you see the developments across the border, there's definitely a reason for also not worrying but taking countermeasures. For instance, the infrastructure development in Tibet and close to the border, where there is no population, there are no resources. What does it indicate? They are bringing rail link to Lhasa is understood, but infrastructure build up along the border is not understood.
So we need to understand the intention of the
deployment of nukes, as you mentioned, in Tibet, that is pointing at India, that must be taken into account. So what has happened as a consequence of this infrastructure, that must be considered. Earlier the time frame we had appreciated, the Chinese will give us probably to react, is about 60 days. But due to this factor, that time frame has been cut down.
Cut down to what?
Maybe about 30-40 days now. So therefore,
almost cut down by half.
Cut down almost by half. Therefore, we have to be prepared to counter their threat within that time frame.
So we have to be prepared to counter their threat. General Kocher, now, you know, so as China is concerned, there are a couple of things we have to keep in mind. Their build up along the LAC, then their missile capability, then their friendship with Pakistan and the way they're trying to befriend some of the other countries, they're trying to reach into the Indian Ocean. Now, you know, these are multiple kind of threats. Now, if you had to prioritize, what do you think is the most serious, worrisome part as far as China is concerned?
One is their claim to Arunachal. They have said it on number of occasions. They don't recognize the McMahon line. They believe that Tawang, where the 6th Dalai Lama was born, belongs to them. And the other second place where I think we need to worry a great deal is Nepal. When I see the map of India, I see Nepal as its forehead.
Yes.
And it is likely to give headaches in future, particularly if the red flag comes in.
The moist influence is almost is tremendous already.
Tremendous already
Nepal.
there. Yes. And if Mr. Prachanda comes in, then you may have to look, or they might even go for revision of 1950 treaty.
Okay, so in your opinion, Arunachal Pradesh
and
is the
Nepal.
first priority, and then after that Nepal. Professor Datta, would you agree with the priorities?
No, I would say they have a shifting stance. You start with the Exai chain, you come to Arunachal Pradesh quickly, then you are giving it a deal, then you come to Bamla, then you come to Tawang, then you've been changing your stance, it's trying to negotiate on different fronts. And meanwhile also trying to build up the potential to the level that could pose a kind of imaginary threat. Now we are trying to see as a more potential threat coming from China on a different planks.
So you would rather look at it
no,
from a
I
different
would
point
say
of view.
no Nepal now, then we should rather more bothered about moist in India. First is that we need to at least admit is China as a threat. Now we have not been clear on that.
Major DP Singh, in your opinion, how do we prioritize the threats?
China believes in not only verbally threatening the neighbors, but also physically taking action when required.
But is our response good enough, or are we dithering in our response?
As far as response is concerned, it appears to be good, I will not say good enough, but certainly people are now seized of the problem. I think at the highest level.
So we are at least waking up to the problem.
General DP Singh, let's go back.
May I just complete it? One definite indicator is the raising of two divisions for that sector and to be located over there.
So we are waking up to the problem.
Let's go back a little. When our first ambassador to China, and when he was briefing Pandit Nehru, Sardar Panika, and Nehru asked about China, and the first thing that he gave was that India must please China, and we've been pleasing China. You don't conduct your relations on appeasement policy.
So you mean that still continues?
That still is a mindset. There's a reason that we've not been able to somehow, take to this issue. Is the China a threat, and how are we going to deal China's threat? Is it an appeasement policy? Is it an engagement policy?
I think in your opinion, we continue to follow the policy of appeasement.
Yes.
Yeah, here we'll take a short break. When we return, we discuss whether India's response against China has been adequate. Welcome back. We are in conversation with Lieutenant General Kochhar, Professor Datta, and Major General DP Singh. General Kochhar, now we all know the threat from China is for real. How do you look at the military parity between India and China? It is generally believed that China spends double the money that we spend on defense. Do you think we need to increase our spending on defense?
The good old dictum of the Chinese that the political power of a nation comes from the military barrel of a gun. I think I wouldn't put it relevant in our context, because if you are economically strong, then obviously you will be giving more money to defense. Therefore, military power and economic power are force multipliers to each other. They cannot be viewed as independently.
So that's the area we need to concentrate on.
Absolutely. So I think we are in a very positive direction.
How do you look at the parity of the two nations? It is generally believed that as far as China is concerned, they're qualitatively, numerically, they are far more superior as far as nuclear weapons are concerned, the missile capability is concerned.
See, no doubt China has the largest army as of today in the world. But when we calculate this parity, we don't just go by what total strength China has got. We have to keep in mind that in the theater in which we have our interest and from where the threat can emerge for India, what is the force level that China can bring to bear upon us? Now, if you take that into account, then we have to see, to respond to that threat, what should we do? I think as far as calculations are concerned, we have done a homework and our strength levels are not a cause for worry for India.
But then we also have other sectors to take care of. We have the Pakistan factor, then we also have to watch the Indian Ocean.
That's been taken into account, how much threat can develop from both the sides simultaneously or echelon. Well, I just want to add here that once we've done that, what we need to do is not the numerical strength only. What's relevant or pertinent to consider is that whether we have the armament equipment, its modern equipment, to also match the opponents. I think that is where we are lacking, not only in the numbers but also in the state of serviceability.
So maybe we need more state-of-the-art equipment. As far as numbers is concerned, we are not too badly off.
Serviceability and updating. Both.
Okay, Professor Datta, do you agree with him?
If we look at the nations not different from individuals, that the currency is the power, and that is what also in my